Hello everyone, good afternoon. I'm Ankita from NASSCOM and I'm back with the 13th episode of the product management series, and today we'll have an interactive session on the topic product platform thinking approach and why it is critical for companies of all sizes. To deliver this fantastic session, I have with me Naveen, Senior Product Leader, Rakuten, who will share his perspective on this intriguing topic. You can ask questions anytime during the session as Naveen will cater to them in parallel to his delivery and will answer your questions on as and when basis. Do not forget to leave your feedback to help me improve my future webinars. Welcome Naveen, and over to you.
Hey, thank you so much Ankita for the warm introduction. Good afternoon all. Thank you for joining in. I know it's pretty much a little post your lunchtime, so I hope to keep you engaged and hopefully you don't fall asleep. On a very key note, I think please feel free to jump in with your questions as and when you have any, and we can always pause and take a look and see if I can add value. Today's topic is a very deep topic that's very dear to me, very dear to pretty much I think the world at large, because oftentimes a very sound and a very strong product and platform approach can pretty much a strong product and platform approach can pretty much create a huge value add in the way the world is operating today. And this is the rise of very key product and platform companies in the world. You pretty much have a lot of experienced players out there that are really doing a lot in this area, like the Facebooks, the Googles, the Microsofts, and what have you. So I will begin my session. Ankita, am I audible, and can I proceed to the next slide? Can you let me know if you see it?
Yeah, still we are on the first slide, which is the topic's name.
Yeah. Perfect. So, here's a very quick raise your hand type of a question. I would encourage each of you to throw in your questions on this to spot the similarities in these two platforms. What you see here on the left is a 2003 Michael Schumacher Ferrari Formula One car, for those that follow this exciting sport. And the one that you see on the right is a British Airways airplane. And then let me know, just feel free to throw in your questions and tell me what do you see as a product here, and what do you see as a platform here, and how do you visualize the whole thing. I would be open to questions. In case you guys have any questions, please feel free to chime in.
Naveen, we have
okay, speed. I see one from Anjuna. Yeah, I see speed. Sure. What else? Raghav, both are used for traveling. Yes. Okay. Travel. Okay. Vehicle and speed. Nagesh says brand name. Hitesh says brand name. Shreya says engine. Run on gasoline. Ashok, similarities in engine. Ankit, purpose. Perfect. I think we have a strong base there. Thank you. I think there are a lot of very similar views. So, to cut to the chase, basically, these are both examples of a very strong platform. That's basically the Formula One car, which is an aggregation of so many different parts from so many different manufacturers. Engine is, let's say, in the one on the left is a Ferrari Formula One engine. Chassis, their entire works. The tires are probably in those days used to be supplied by Bridgestone or Michelin. These days it's Pirelli, and then so many different parts that are just coming together to create a cohesive whole where the total is much greater than the sum of the parts. Likewise on the right, you probably, this British Airways aeroplane runs Rolls-Royce Trent engines, runs whatever, audio video on demand by some other different component manufacturer, wiring probably can circle the entire earth, by some other third party, maybe the glass is made of some other, but look at the product, right? When it all comes together, the total is so much greater than the sum of the parts. And all of this at some point in the journey of building out these platforms, which are easily, the one on the left, Ferrari continues to run multi-million-dollar budgets every year to just produce a world-class Formula One car. Aeroplanes, as you all know, cost millions of dollars as well. So, there is a lot of value in a platform play where you're actually trying to say how many different product manufacturers come together to create a platform, and that becomes a cohesive whole. This kind of leads me into the next element on the conversation, and let me know, Ankita, if this is not visible. We are going to the key tenets of product. Give us a moment while it loads, and Ankita, you can let me know if it doesn't show up. You should be on your screens, be able to see the key tenets of product. You are? Okay, perfect. So, a lot of product management is all about knowing your customer, right? Who is the end consumer of my product and service? You've got to have deep empathy for your customer, because everything starts and stops with your customer. Jeff Bezos used to sum it up. Our founder in Rakuten, Hiroshi Mikitani, is you got to be obsessed with your customers. That's what these greats evangelize. And you got to literally live and breathe with deep empathy for your customers, so that at the end of the day, you're focusing on a customer job to be done, as I call it, right? And you essentially are saying, hey, what is a problem that a product is solving? Why does it exist? Why does a problem exist? And then will the product and service that somebody uses to solve that particular problem meet the needs of the problem in the first place, right? Will it solve the customer job to be done? And then what are my end customer personas like? Can I actually come up with whatever XYZ customer persona, put their characteristics and evaluate how are they actually going to interact with my product and service to help fulfill their unmet, unarticulated needs? How do I address those needs through a technological intervention? Tech is an enabler. How do I focus, right? How do I focus relentlessly? How do I actually look at what I call very firmly, I think I would encourage each of you to ping me on your questions again, on what I evangelize as a valuable, usable, and feasible intersection. It's a Venn diagram. You just drop valuable, you drop usable, and you drop feasible. And product management is really sitting at the center of all the three. So what is value? You provide extreme business value to your end customers with deep empathy for their unmet, unarticulated needs. Something that the customer truly values. They say, oh, wow, here's something that's actually solving my job to be done. Usable, obviously, that product or service has to be, built in such a way that your customers are able to use it. There's no point building a car without an engine. It's not going to go any further. There's no point, building a plane without an engine. Again, it won't fly anywhere. So you got to have the product that is usable. And then feasible, it's a very key aspect, often overlooked in many product management areas, which is really about, hey, can my engineers or can my backend folks actually build this thing out? You come up with great concepts as a product manager, sure, yes, but are people able to see value, and are they also able to build on it, right? So so that's really you got to brutally prioritize product capabilities to ensure you're solving and doing the most impactful work first, which is what leads me to the next point, which is really the outcome of focus and also ruthlessly prioritizing, because we product managers are really paid to take decisions. If we live in a world where we really also have to collaborate, viability of the product, Naman has a question. Yeah, that is very true. The viability is in some sense the, how viable is this product? What is my end user going to do with this product? And is it going to meet those unmet, unarticulated needs? Agreed. Good point. Any other questions? Please keep, throwing those questions in, and I'll try to read out as many as I can. And another, business viability, of course, yes, that's what I mean when I say value. So, Nagesh. So basically, business viability is all about the, looking at, are we creating value for the business when the product is actually used in that context for your end users? Moving on, right? So another key element of product management and platform thinking is all about collaboration and teamwork. We live in a world, gone are the days when you got to just look at a very top-down hierarchical approach alone. You got to also look at a very key aspect, which is really all about collaboration. The greatest product companies today are going to be successful in a big way if you encourage cross-team collaboration. What do I mean by this? Basically, you got to encourage top-down decision making, bottom-up decision making, and middle out, as I call it. All three are equally important. There are various frameworks that can help you identify these. For example, you have objectives and key results, a great construct which was pioneered by Andy Grove of Intel, later, kind of made its way through John Doerr into the Google world, where the founders of Google adopted this, and they are on many forums. They've gone public to say, hey, you know what? We leveraged OKRs and a powerful model, and we saw 10x in improvements in how we were actually going about building our products, as an example. So there is a great book. I would encourage all of you to read it. It's called Measure What Matters. It's authored by John Doerr. The website is whatmatters.com. whatmatters.com. So moving on, you got to also identify the goal, right? As with any product and service, everything pretty much begins with the user's unmet, unarticulated need, and then you're actually going to have to say, okay, you know what? Whose problem are you solving? What are you doing? That's the goal. Where do we want to get to, right? You've got to be very careful, and you've got to be very visionary when you're actually articulating a goal for yourself. There are various methodologies that again help you do that. There are frameworks. Salesforce's Mark Benioff uses what he calls as a V2 MOM: vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measures. That works for him. There are others, like I said, in the OKR model that use an objective. You could probably lay out an organization-wide L1 OKR, and then you actually have your teams write out their own OKRs that align with this, measure it by key results. That's another format. There are other organizations that probably use management by objectives, which is really what OKRs were also in some sense derived from in some aspects. KPIs, obviously, all of these. So that basically helps you not only set a goal for yourself, but also you're able to, at checkpoints, measure how are you doing, how are you faring. Are you getting to that end goal? Are you doing the right product strategy to actually get to that end goal in the first place? The next is really all about writing product specifications and user stories. Now, when we talk about this, basically what we are also trying to articulate is saying, how do you actually go about authoring a very good product spec, which starts with the product need, right? The what and the why. And then you basically lay out a series of interaction workflows that probably are important in the context of your product or service. And then you actually build on it. I'll probably pause here, see if you guys have any questions, and I will dive a little deeper into product discovery and customer development. Ankita, I'm moving to the next slide, but I am open for questions. And yeah.
There was one question during the beginning of the session by Ashwini. Can I just read out it for you? Can I read it for you?
You should be able to see my screen which says decision making. Let me know if you can't.
Yes, I can. I can view.
Hey, Ankita?
Yeah, I can see the next slide. I'm saying there is one
Ankita?
Question which we have missed. Yes, it is. It is. I'm saying there is one question in the beginning. We missed it out. Shall I read it for you?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, I would love questions to be asked as and when people have it. Please feel free to pop it.
Sure. It is by Ashwini. He's asking that how can customer support function think at a platform level?
Customer support at a platform level. Well, it's a good question. Thank you. So I think what you have to do in customer support is take again the view of the end customer, right? Customer support's job is, the primary goal is to provide world-class customer support and service to your end consumers for any product or service, whatever, right? It could be, your Airtel, you're probably offering customer support. You're probably Tata Sky that provides television services, and therefore, there is a CS desk. Now, the most important element, if I were a product manager designing a customer support system, and I have done quite a few in the past, is to actually build a level of engagement. So the first thing that starts, with conceptualizing of a product idea to aid customer support better would be something that is a very good customer engagement management solution tool. That basically helps get all your stakeholders onto the same page. Today, oftentimes, issues are raised to customer. Let's first look at what the pain points are, right? You are a customer. Let's assume this is Tata Sky. Issues are raised. You know what? The damn thing, it rained and therefore I don't get television. And I have to see this, whatever, World Cup match that's being played between India and New Zealand. What the heck? So there could be another which says, you know what, your television channels, you suddenly started charging. These are pain points your customers are now expressing. How do you actually build out empathy for these use cases? The first one is really to figure, hey, I'm Tata Sky, what would I do differently to ensure customer experience isn't hampered? And then you probably start there. Likewise, the platform on which all of this is run is probably an engagement management solution. There are plenty out there, to be honest, right? And there are many more that are very homegrown. And I've been witness to both ends of the spectrum. There are pros and cons to both. So you would probably just build out a very strong connector between the end customer and the customer support executives, and oftentimes empower. I think what also oftentimes we ignore is you got to be able to empower the customer support person at the other end to be able to operate a series of workflows. Let's say XYZ customer is asking for a refund. Maybe this guy has an upper limit to be within which he or she could refund for a product or service that was probably faulty, didn't meet the customer's needs. So you got to build whatever, some level of flexibility to that customer support executive and build a workflow there in your customer engagement management solution, which helps them do that. Likewise, you could probably build out another series of engagement methodologies which will also allow for escalations. So maybe you're not happy with the service that your customer service desk offered. How does your product or platform now offer a series of escalation methods that will take it to L1 manager, L2 manager, whatever, right? And then there is a call to action. If it is escalated, there is an SLA. You will define all of these. It's maybe a rule basis or whatever. Today in the world of AI and ML, you could use advanced techniques that could solve this problem better. And then you basically provide interaction touch points to also measure customer satisfaction. Maybe you will have the traditional way is just send out a customer satisfaction survey end of the call or end of the interaction on whatever, through mobile app or whatever, and say, hey customer, are you happy with the product or service you just got? And oftentimes we have seen, or at least in my product experiences with dealing with CS desks, the take-up rate on some of these surveys are really poor. It's not less than, I think, 3 to 4% or so. And I would be happy to hear if some of you have seen a greater percentage than that. So when people float out surveys, so that's not maybe the, for every 100, only 4 probably answered a survey. So something on that sort. So, you got to think of all of these dimensions, and then you say, okay, what is the USP of this new engagement management solution going to look like? These are some thoughts. Not sure if I answered your question in entirety, but hopefully, it gives you some food for thought on how I would imagine a platform that's built for a CS type of an engagement. It's all starting and stopping with engagement. And by the way, in the days of social media as is today, you got to be like super active on ensuring there is the right connect with the customers across disparate media. It could be Facebook, Firehose, Facebook as a channel, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. There are so many. Does that help? Ankita, I'm not sure if I can see that question, but I would love to hear if it helped answer that question.
Great answer, thank you. This is his response.
Sorry?
Ashwini just responded that great answer, thank you. So yeah, it suffices.
Oh, okay, perfect, great. Okay, perfect, great. So let's move on, right? I think there's a very strong topic that I'm going to cover next, which is really all about product discovery and customer development. Right? What do we mean when we say product discovery and customer development? It kind of ties into this topic on this slide, which is decision making. We'll get to this. But before this, I think you guys should kind of spend some cycles trying to understand what is customer development all about? How does someone go about building a product? How does that product over time evolve into, a network where you're adding, sort of a flywheel effect in some sense? And then ultimately evolving into a platform, great platforms. Let's take example of 2 of them. let's take Uber, where there is greater supply of drivers. Some customers are suddenly seeing great customer experience on an Uber app or an Ola app, and they suddenly flock to the app. Because there are more customers, there is more need for increasing the supply, in this case, more drivers. So you add that, create a superior customer experience, whatever, offer great payment modes, etc., to the end customer. More customers are attracted. Suddenly, there is many nodes in the Bangalore city, if you're looking at Bangalore as an example, that get connected by these services, and that's a self-fulfilling flywheel effect. So that's the platform effect. That's the reason most global companies strive to be platforms and not just pure play products, which is really going back to what topic we chose for the session, which is really platform thinking. But to do all this, right, I think the first step is really product discovery. You got to start small. You got to start somewhere. You got to start with your customer. Now, how are you going to actually do extensive customer development to be able to set a series of hypotheses on your customer pain points and then run experiments, pick, let's say, B2B, B2C, depending on whichever, vertical you're looking at. And I have had the experience and good fortune of working in companies at scale in both of these. Business to business is what I mean when I say B2B, and B2C is business to consumer. So a good example of a B2C service is something like our Rakuten Ichiba marketplace, where the company, it's actually B2B2C model. The company sells to another retailer that has a web shop and then sells to end consumers. Flipkart offers a mobile app which basically sells to consumers directly. Whatever, Ola, you provide an app where customers can go in there and order an app and get from point A to point B. Those are good examples of B2C players, or B2B2C, depending on the use case. B2B players, Microsoft's actually pivoted, become more of an enterprise product company than as a consumer product company. So they have more enterprise customers. They sell their products and services through those. I think the latest split, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, latest numbers I know is about 61% of Microsoft revenues actually comes from enterprises, and 39% or comes from consumers. But that doesn't necessarily mean that one target segment is any lesser than the other. It just means there is core focus of the company on trying to be the best and help people improve people's productivity, help them do more and achieve more. So you're basically taking examples of all of these, but then no matter what, right, type of company that you really have to be able to run, pick your customer persona, figure an unarticulated need of your customer, set out a bunch of hypotheses that you would want to run experiments on, and then you basically measure what matters, really bake an instrumentation to help you make data-backed decision making, and then build that empathy, obviously, right from the beginning, customer, and then working backwards to say, what are you building for that customer which solves their job to be done? Prioritize across, let's say, XYZ feature sets that you'd want to lay for your customers, and then ultimately ship something really quick for them. That's what we call as a minimum product, or in most cases, minimum viable product. And then learn from the customers, because they start using it, they start giving you feedback. And then you iterate very quickly towards the final shippable product, and you keep learning all through the stage from your end customers. This is really the model every great product company adopts. There is no change. It just depends on how quickly can they iterate, how quickly can they listen to the needs of their customers, and then how quickly can they build out a standardized product offer, and offer value-added services over and above that. As product managers, we also need to focus on monetization, pricing options to help generate revenues, right? The company is there, which also one of the key elements is really focusing on monetization as a driver. And then you're focusing on customer service to ensure your products users are satisfied in using this. You probably will build out a series of measures to actually help measure this. You focus on the product life cycle, keep evolving the product over time, because otherwise someone else will come in and disrupt you. And then you got to build awareness, structure, and engagement to be effective and efficient. So these are all, at the end of the day, right, culminating into whatever tens of thousands of decisions a product manager probably makes in a given year. And then that's why I thought this was so important, that all of this aspect of customer development really lends into this decision-making framework. There are a few that you guys can adopt, and I would love to again open it up for questions and see if you guys want chip in with your bit. Product discovery and customer development also, there are many frameworks. One that I like a lot is, you can Google on this, so this is nothing which is not there on Google, but it's a methodology I call a circles method. It's there basically to focus on, the first C stands for comprehend the situation. The I stands for identify the customer needs and the personas. The I stands for identifying the persona. The R is really reporting the customer needs. The C again is cutting through prioritization. The L is to list the solutions. The E is to evaluate trade-offs, basically decision making, again thoughtful, analytical, and objective. And the last S is really to summarize a recommendation. You kind of offer a recap, why, build versus buy, all of that, right? You've got to build out a strong recommendation. So that's the circles method. Would pause here, wait and see if you guys have any questions on this, because it's really a very powerful method of visualizing product management. And we can jump into the next topic related to this product platform thinking, which is how do you apply some of this framework that I just highlighted to different types of companies, bootstrap startups, SMEs, and large enterprises. Ankita, any questions from the audience?
Yes. Yeah, there's one by Nagesh wherein he's asking that what prototyping frameworks during discovery you use to make both qualitative and quantitative decisions.
Yeah, so good question. Thank you, Nagesh. So I think there are a couple that have been extremely successful. I have used some heavily. The first one is obviously an evolutionary prototype, and I'm a big fan of this. Basically, you build a very quick proof of concept. Validate, take a small customer base, a small customer segment. Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't look at all your, great VCs will tell you this, venture capitalists will tell you this, that you don't typically go and say the world is your target market. Then clearly you just lack focus. I mean, in the context of a startup, that is, right? So basically what that begs, that there is an inner meaning in that. And that is to say, you got to be like laser focused on a target persona you would want to pick. So let's pick, a small segment of your target audience. You don't need to necessarily go in and solve everybody's problem at the same time. And try, and even Facebook, by the way, began in the Harvard dorm, right? It began with just addressing the needs of social media and social networking for the Harvard Business School participants. And then they expanded it to other colleges, and then it became viral. And today you have what, 2+ billion people around the planet using it. So there is a deep need to actually stay focused on a very small audience set, validate, set a bunch of hypothesis elements that you'd want to validate, which you think is an unmet, unarticulated need of your customer. Go do your customer development exercises, maybe go talk to them. I've done this a lot. So I'll give you a few anecdotes, right? So in my stint in Flipkart, in Capillary Technologies, here in Rakuten, and in other companies, it always is super beneficial for us product managers to feel the pulse of our customers as far as possible in real time. Go look at, study their behavior. If anything, right, not just product managers, maybe even designers, interaction designers, should accompany these product managers, go visit the customer. I would do this a lot when I was part of the last mile product team, and in the Appplay, in the transactional platform for Flipkart, when I was there, we used to just study customer behavior very closely, and obviously, feel the pulse of the customer through what channels of interaction, customer support desk, how people are engaging with your product, blah blah blah. So what you will build there is a deep empathy for the customer's needs, and then you set out a small proof of concept, like I said, highlighting that small subsegment of your target customers, and then you build out a product or service, very low fidelity. I'm re-emphasizing that word, and I'll get to that in a second. And then you basically go put it out there in front of your target personas and say, hey, by the way, I've thought of this product or service, and this is like really low fid, so don't expect like a complete cohesive product yet. Don't whatever, right? Go to that Ferrari or that the British Airways Airbus A380 or whatever that you saw earlier on my slide deck. You're not there yet, so you're probably starting off really small, and then you're saying, hey, is this solving the need of my customer? And then go validate it with your customer. And in all likelihood, if that is validated, run experiments. Maybe do A/B testing extensively. Set out a treatment group, a control group in your target's customers. validate it. If it's B2C, you have a certain methodology of doing it. I may not be able to cover all of that within this short session, but I'd be happy to engage with you offline as well. Please write to me through NASSCOM, or maybe throw in a question here and they'll reach out to me. You've got to run a series of experiments and then whatever, right? See if that product is, and then maybe pivot. Pivot is a big Silicon Valley term for either changing the course of your business model, of your product, target customers itself, maybe, changing the problem that you want solved for your customer completely through your product or service, etc. So you be free to take pivots. Maybe the first solution that you have isn't super accurate, but you will iterate and build on it over time and get there, provided you're solving the right problem for the right customer. So it's very important, like I said, right, to run that quick POC, and then, in other words, build it out into an alpha, whatever minimum product over time, and then it should be viable. And then you got to, once you put it out there in front of your customers, ship fast, ship frequently, and then you see where you get to. Does that help? Ankita, not sure if I'm seeing that question, but I'd love to know if it's solved Nagesh's.
Yes, Naveen,
Okay.
it was a great answer. Another question, do you want to cater to another question, or would you want to continue with the slide?
No. I think I'll take that question and then move on to the next slide.
Okay, the other one is by Shubham. He's asking that do B2B products should be developed as platform or a pure play product seeing the usability by the enterprises?
Correct. Good question again, Shubham. There is no cookie cutter answer to this question. You will have to validate it with the needs of the enterprises that you're building out. Let's dwell on this, right? So B2B is a very complex play. Oftentimes, as a company, external, by the way, that selling a product or service to an enterprise, you would almost always have to go through decision makers that aren't necessarily the people who buy the product, aren't necessarily the people who use the product. Remember that. I will say it again. The people who buy a product in an enterprise scenario may or may not always be the users of that product or service. The users are somebody else. So maybe there is a CIO, Chief Information Officer, that makes these procurement decisions. Maybe it's a loyalty head if it is a loyalty-based product like what we used to sell in Capillary Technologies. Maybe it is the enterprise one division building out products and services for other divisions of the same enterprise because the enterprise is so massive. There are all of these use cases. So that is the reason I said there isn't a very cookie cutter answer to this question. You would probably almost always start with a product play, to be frank, but you have to always have the goal and vision set wide enough so that you're able to cover not just a product first thinking, but also evolving somehow into platform so that you can get more and more users to the product and platform and improve it over time. But it's perfectly fine if you just getting a very solid product that solves a customers unmet unarticulated needs in that enterprise, and maybe keep it there and then build on getting and acquiring newer customers for that. It's perfectly fine. I'm not saying you should always see and shoot for that utopian goal, which is to build it out as a platform, but it always helps. I have seen history has shown that in most cases, even Salesforce is a platform, and I think they have benefited phenomenally from solving for customer engagement management solutions all through in whether it is lead gen for your field sales force, whether it is interaction at various touch points in the sales process of the sales cycle for an enterprise. You can take innumerable examples. In the interest of time, I'd probably be able to take only a couple, but then you get the idea. So not sure if that helps answer your question again, but would be Ankita.
Yeah. Naveen, there are few more questions, but I don't know, like, would you like to answer them as well, or would you want to continue the presentation?
You know what we can do? Yeah, so you know what, I would love to keep on taking questions, but in the
Alright.
interest of time, and I'm not
Yeah.
time boxing this, Ankita. I don't know if our audience have any time limit at 3:30. I don't. I can probably go on 10-15 minutes if the audience are okay and you're okay. But then I would love to take questions towards maybe the next pause that I'll take in the next 10 minutes or so. Sounds good, Ankita?
Sure, Naveen, but I think we have a hard stop at 3:30 because the session
Or
is for
3:30?
an hour. So yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. So then we'll park about 5-10 minutes towards the end for questions. I don't want to hurry through. I think we've gone to the next topic. Uh, does that framework of circles and customer development, product discovery, ways to go about thinking about those problems, we covered some of this and we kind of scratched it at the surface. Does that framework really apply to bootstrap startups? This is a question I am asked a lot oftentimes, and my answer to all these folks that have come to me with this question is usually almost always yes. Product management is really a scarce, expensive commodity for bootstrap startups. Oftentimes, your startup begins with a couple of folks. One is a CEO, one is a CTO, small team. They cobble together that team, and then product management may or may not find its way through. Maybe it's lucky if one of the guys, right, the CXO guys, has some prior experience in product management. Oftentimes, they may not. But then they soon realize the need for one, especially if they feel that they're lacking in that area. But the good news is that they will pivot often. These are smart individuals that have anyway got together. So they will pivot often until they figure the right market to product fit. And the idea by itself these days doesn't really amount to anything. Great ideas are good, but great ideas by themselves only go that far. You really have to validate the right market to product fit if that idea has to reach anywhere of significance. And then the focus becomes execution via repeatable processes to come up with products. So for these bootstrap startups, and then obviously, right, they're always very cost conscious. Remember that they don't have VCs funding them with tons of money. So they really had to be focusing, and sometimes constraint is a good thing. So you got to focus on those low fidelity prototypes so that you don't waste other people's time or money. These are all scarce commodities more so in a bootstrap startup world. It's obviously true of every startup or large company or mid-sized company, but more so because even it's always a question of running against time and running to conserve your money. And then you validate the hypothesis, you run your experiments and look at what the market you're operating in and be aware of technical challenges, usability challenges, people challenges, etc.
Naveen, the slide
So,
is not moving. I hope we are are we on the
no, we are
same?
still on the decision making. Yeah, we are still
Oh,
on the decision making. Not to
sure.
worry. Not to worry. It's only now that I have moved, but you will probably see this in the next 10 seconds. Don't worry. It's all connected, so don't worry about it. I'm just laying the context out for one of the topics that I'd highlighted earlier. So
Sure,
we
sure.
now move on with the same circles framework and other product discovery and customer development exercises. And we ask ourselves, do they really apply to, B2C startups, B2B startups, B2B2C startups? I think yes, it applies to all. And then the key question there becomes, how will you measure success? What are your success metrics? It's very key to ask yourself in product management on what your success metrics look like. We did highlight and allude to a few earlier in this discussion. We spoke of objectives, key results. I gave you that book by John Doerr. Do take a read, fantastic book. The Intel founders benefited the company. Google has benefited immensely. A lot of companies have adopted OKR models now. You have other ways as well, but then at what point will you ship your MVP, minimum viable product? How will you make money? You got to think monetization from pretty much get go. What stage will you start pitching to early angels if you're in the mood to move from a bootstrap mode to angel funding? And then what will you focus on alongside the founders, the business model canvas, etc. There are so many, again, frameworks that are available out there. How will you use roadshows to spread the word to get adopters, right? Product management, as I always say, we spoke of valuable, usable, feasible, and that Venn diagram. To dwell on product management's other tenet, it is really about where product management sits in a given organization. If it's a startup, it probably is, and if it's, given the due respect it deserves, then it probably sits right in between product engineering and product marketing. So product marketing will probably be the one to do those road shows, telling the world to get early adopters. Product engineering focuses on building out the product. And then focus on continuous innovation in scaling a startup if you're in a bootstrap mode. And then you focus on standardization versus customization. Often, right? B2B, B2C, whichever, more so B2B. When you start talking to enterprise customers, their needs are slightly different. And you have to really spend a lot of cycles to figure out what are the commonalities in that need. What can you productize and standardize? and then what are the other elements which are very unique to each enterprise incremental customer you onboard, and then figure out how do you offer customization on that. So you got to focus on that tenet, which is focus on customization versus standardization. And then you got to ask yourself a very strong question, the decision thing, right? We're still on that decision, but I know we moved to the vision strategy. But then at what point would you declare your MVP a success? What are those decisions you will take to measure success for your product and the minimum product to say, hey, you know what? It looks like the hypothesis is validated. Let's now go scale. Let's build out the full product now. Let's move from the low fidelity mode to complete product. Let's get to that Ferrari or get to that whatever, right? Let's make the car go at 200 miles per hour, Formula One example, or let's make that plane fly at 1,000 kilometers per hour. How will you take this platform approach to drive a self-fulfilling flywheel? We spoke of this. So, this is really the focus on the bootstrap layer. Now I'll quickly move on and spend a few cycles talking to you guys about growth stage startups. Again, product management and how it applies to these startups. Again, platform product thinking in the same sense. How do you actually envisage something to be, does it apply to B2C? Does it apply to B2B? Does it go to a B2B2C model? And the truth is yes. So if it is a B2B startup, my own experience, Capillary and some of the other iPass, some of the other companies that I worked with in the past, these were all B2B, business to business. We used to sell to a CIO that would in turn sell to whatever XYZ users. In Capillary, we would sell to a loyalty officer or the loyalty team. They would in turn deploy the software. It used to be used omni-channel. These are all B2B products. Now, you got to be very clear about identifying the core of the product and the context. And again, the standardization, customization element matters a lot. If it is B2C, you've got to identify if your internal systems are built for good, solid customer satisfaction measurement, platform scaling. How will you measure success? What are your success metrics again? What point will you ship your MVP? How will you expand your target markets and do necessary pivots to get to the next stage to sustain and move towards a hockey stick type growth? How will you address, as you start scaling, you'll probably hit the speed bump of domestic market native language versus internationalization. Do you then decide, if you're an India company, then do you decide, do you go west to target the US, UK, etc., or whatever, other European geographies, or do you go east, Southeast Asian markets, Australia, etc.? You got to ask yourself these questions. How do you use conferences and roadshows to spread the word? How do you do continuous innovation? At what point would you declare your product as a mature product that evolved to a platform? How will you build that flywheel effect? These are areas you've got to spend some cycles thinking to yourself about in a growth funded startup and an SME of sorts, a small and medium enterprise. Does product management, this kind of is a natural segue, and it leads me into the next one, which is really around product management and innovation centric focus of large enterprises. Large enterprises almost always battle this problem of the innovator's dilemma. I would encourage all of you to read this book, Innovator's Dilemma, by my guru, Clayton Christensen from Harvard Business School. Essentially, it's about how almost always large enterprises are, they just fail to see that next big wave and suddenly, it's passed them by. There are innumerable examples in the world. I will, for the sake of this discussion, only try to resort to some examples. Let's say Microsoft failed to see the mobile smartphone wave. Just yesterday or day before, I was reading an article that Bill Gates had, he was speaking about the same concept. He was like, no, we should have nailed, it was a natural evolution of the PC to morph into smaller form factors, as he would call it. So, they just missed that wave. You look at other entrants, maybe entering into complete new areas, uncharted territories, the traditional retail players, and you're seeing how disruption is happening at the low end from newer players. So there are innumerable examples. I'm only going to restrict it to a concept to say, I strongly encourage you guys to read up the Innovator's Dilemma, and you'll see a lot of value in what I'm saying. But you've got to really be able to encounter sustained innovation products in these large enterprises that are probably almost always in a maintenance mode. Somehow there are very few areas for innovation or identified for innovation. Even if there are, you'll need to build out the required consensus to drive that end to end. And then you basically have to focus and move into that area, right? The next one is almost always you go to you probably parachuted into a turnaround or a new innovation area in a large enterprise, and you're like, oh my God, where do I begin, right? So that's another challenge you may encounter. So you got to step up and prepare yourself for that. Then you got to work within defined processes. So for example, you got to be understanding the culture, dynamics are very important. You got to prove with early wins, validate the success of your product, your process, your people, your technology, etc., etc. Build the right team, build the required consensus. Almost always large enterprises creating innovation labs and a focus and carve outs for innovation is going to be all about trying to get the right alignment. So you got to understand dependencies, measure successes, report those successes periodically to senior management, get buy-ins from the execs, etc. You got to leverage always, in the absence of anything else, use data-backed decision making. It has helped me. I'm sure it will help you. Build the required bridges, trying to disrupt what's established. Understand the culture, really, really key. Sometimes cross-cultural nuances may be playing a spoil sport. So you got to focus on all of these. You got to foster separate channels for driving innovation versus, carve out separate tracks for, driving innovation versus keeping the lights on stuff, as I call it, right? And then you focus on disruptive innovation to create moving the needle products. That's very key. So that is in some sense how one looks at applying product management to areas in large enterprises. You're all seeing the slide now. We finally gotten to a point where I spoke to you a little bit in brief about product management as it applied to bootstrap startups, growth stage companies, large enterprises. How do you carve out innovation, products and platforms? It all sounds easier. Sounds easy, easier said than done. But then, trust me, I think if you have the right frameworks in place and you build the required cultural nuance and the understanding, I think you will be able to succeed in each of these areas that I just highlighted to you. It is not impossible. And my experience has proven it to me that it is not impossible. I worked in companies of all of these types in various B2B, B2C, B2B2C flavors. Trust me, it's worked for me in every single company. It takes patience. It takes a lot of hard work. Product management is not a 9-to-5 job. If you're dealing cross geographies, dealing in the same geography, it does not matter. You will almost always spend cycles with working across the organization, from business to engineers to cross-functional stakeholders. It's fun. I think the joy is on the journey, and I think you guys will see value in enjoying it. So I'll pause there, see if there are questions. I know we have about 13 minutes left before we conclude the talk. Ankita, I would love to get some more questions from the audience, and I'll just conclude by giving a brief on the vision, strategy, execution, and going on to the next.
Sure, Naveen, there's another by Bhagat, wherein he's asking that for finding the market fit, we obviously need to test the hypothesis. In order to do that, how many customer interactions / surveys do we need to take to understand the market?
Good question. I didn't get the first name, but I got the last name. I think it's Bhagat. So there isn't, typically I have read again that in a B2C flavor or in a B2B flavor, generally 8 is a good number. But then, by the way, if you're talking about surveys, I would generally frown on that. You've got to be able to go talk to your end customers. I'm a big fan of going and talking to them face to face wherever I have the opportunity. I would encourage you to do that too. Like I said earlier on my talk, surveys typically only have a take-up rate which is in low single digits. I would be very surprised if somebody comes to me and tells me, you know what, I floated this great survey and whatever, right? People's time is expensive. I don't think they have all the time in the world to come in and answer your surveys. What is important to you may not be a problem they're even seeing, or they're not even aware they have that problem. Why would they care to respond to your survey? So there are enough challenges there. But then I have built empathy with customers by observing how they interact with, let's say, an operational process. I'll give an example. In our days in Flipkart, just by observing customers on the last mile supply chain, the product team that I was part of, I was actually leading, we actually got some very interesting customer insights into how they were leveraging some of the operational capabilities we were providing to them. But there was a real unmet, unarticulated need where a product and technology could transform the way that entire process went. So it's just one small example, but then there are whether it is maybe cash management, because Flipkart also has an option to do cash on delivery. And we figured, how does cash management become a pain point? How do we solve that through technology? How do we actually focus on verifying what we collect when people return mobile phones from the customer doorstep? How do we build in technology that solves the problem and reduces customer frauds? So there are n number of examples, I mean, without even naming companies, but then all I'm trying to tell you guys is you have to build deep empathy for your customer. Just simply sitting at your customer within, there is a saying in that book, Lean Startup, the one you see on the left on the screen. Eric Reyes, I would encourage all of you to read this, because he calls out saying, get out of the building, go validate the construct and the hypothesis with your end customers. So you got to then study their behavior and you'll build insights. You'll have a point of view, you'll build those insights, and then you can build on it and build out your product or service that fulfills that unmet and unarticulated need. They don't know they have that problem. You're all probably familiar with the saying, if Ford had gone to his customers and asked, or whatever, would-be customers, and asked them what they wanted, they would have probably said faster horses. So how do you actually, but he came out with cars. So anyway, there are other dimensions to that story as it evolved, but then suffice to say that you got to be able to build empathy, and you got to be able to build those very key insights on how people are interacting with your product, which you will design, product or service. How will your product service build that level of interaction to fulfill that unmet unarticulated need? So it's very important to go talk to them and then engage in a conversation that will lead you to very interesting areas. Hope that helped. Next question, Ankita.
Yeah, the next question is by Nikhil. He's asking how product manager keep an eye on social media for their product and change their product roadmap.
Very good question. So we product managers, right? We get inputs on how our product should be from everybody around us. Our users are telling us what they want. Our engineering team is telling us what they think is great for the product. Our business stakeholders, maybe my boss is telling me I would love this in this product. Maybe my super boss is saying something else. Maybe social media, like you rightly indicated, is a very, very important pulse in how people interact with the product or service today. You're all familiar, I don't know, about 3-4 years ago, I forget the time frame. Somebody, I think Snap said something about India. Snap, the company, basically said something about India. And for whatever crazy reason, people started downvoting the Snapdeal app. We were like, what the heck? I mean, people are talking about completely unrelated app that is sitting in the US. Why are people sitting and downgrading this app that is so, dear to many Indians here in the e-commerce space in those days? So it gives you a sense of how one should keep a sensor on social media. And somebody, it was like, the point is, social media today is very powerful. It is also because of the power of virality. And it is also because it is such a democratized framework today that people can voice their user-generated content. You buy a product or service, you're not happy with it, you'll either go to the reviews on a Flipkart, Amazon, or whatever Rakuten website, and then you probably, or mobile app, and drop in that review or your thoughts. Or you'd probably go vent your frustration on social media. Or you would tag that leader of that company and on social media and say, hey, what the heck's happening? So I've seen customers that do all of this. So the point I'm making is, as a product manager, oftentimes there are very every user, you got to ensure that your customer is king. As a product manager, you cannot move away from that thought process, and you got to then build that insights that your customers are telling you. They're saying, hey, you know what, I feel like this feature would make sense. Maybe if you were to do it this way, then you probably will, your product will meet the needs of, I would buy it, or whatever, right? I'm just giving examples. These could be leveraged through Quora. Maybe somebody would write it on Twitter, somebody would go author it on LinkedIn, maybe someone else will tag a few of their friends and put it up on a Facebook post. Doesn't matter, WhatsApp, whatever. I know WhatsApp's still a little tricky to get access to, but then the other channels are, anyway, you have enough social listening components that you can leverage to make more sense. But it's becoming very common, very valuable. And yes, I hope I've answered your question. It is key. If you're a B2C startup, or B2C company, I'm sorry, not just a startup, B2C company, B2B company, whatever, I think you need to keep an eye on the social media and what users are saying about your product or service. User generated content, democratization of user feedback, very key. Ankita, next question.
Yeah, thanks Naveen for this answer. The next question is, in the service industry or B2B, most of these services are exactly the same that our competing organizations offers. In these cases, what can we do in terms of product development or customer development? You gave example of Uber offering something, but there is Ola offering the same. So please take such examples to answer. Probably he's talking in context to some other previous conversation you had while we began the presentation.
Yeah, no, I think I get the question. So basically, I think the key insight there in that question is all about differentiation. How does one create differentiation if, most feature sets are very similar? How do you actually build out and create that need? Why will anyone choose an Ola over an Uber? Right? Again, it's all about mind share in a B2C construct. In a B2B construct, which I assume the question is pointing to, you can always create USPs depending on how you overemphasize. Products are always, as Steve Jobs used to call it, I think it's all about what's emphasized. Some things are overemphasized in a product, some things are not so overemphasized in a product. And these are packages of emphasis. So you've got to somehow choose the right emphasis and the right USP that you think you can create. So it could be a service you offer over and above product that you deliver to your customer if it is a B2B context. It could be, let me take an example, right? How do you compete with all things being in the e-commerce world? I'll take an example. It's all known that e-commerce is driven by selection, pricing, and delivery. It's not like you are an e-commerce customer and today you say, how I wish my product, I were to go to this e-commerce store and it offers me X percentage products fewer, lesser, basically, less selection, right? You will never do that. But then I'm just giving you the opposite analogy. How I wish the product was priced, whatever, 10, 20,000 rupees more expensive. Nobody would ever think of it that way. How I wish this product reached me 10 days later, right? Nobody will really talk of things in that construct. Instead, what you care about is vast selection, low prices, fast and convenient delivery. So if that is a construct and these are tentpole capabilities every e-commerce player focuses on, how are you going to build differentiation, all other things being equal? You'll probably focus on aspects like saying, can I innovate and can I build and package other services I can offer over and above. Some players innovated with it, they came up with their own construct of whatever, bundling faster delivery cycles for being a loyalty member. Some guys, I'm not going to name the players there. But then the point I'm making is you can create differentiation. And like I said earlier, it's all about the emphasis. What do you choose to emphasize in a product or service, and how do you create that differentiation? Trust me, all things being equal, maybe you could differentiate on price. You're a product manager, you have to worry about price. If you're not worrying about pricing for your product, I don't think it's a complete picture. Honestly, as a product manager, what excites me, one of the things that excites me the most is also worrying about monetization. How can I monetize my product or service offering? So maybe you could monetize on after-sales services. Who knows? I'm just giving examples. I hope that helps. Next question, Ankita. We probably have room for one question. We have 2 minutes left.
Sure, Naveen. The last question is, okay, there are many coming up. Yeah. In this moving world, all applications / product is now offering supporting voice. That is, users can use voice instead of typing. Do you think this is a mandatory stuff that every product manager should now follow?
No, it depends on the need of the product or the service. Just because, so again, right? Let me caution all of you. I'll leave you with a parting note. Remember that a business problem and identifying the right business problem, a customer job to be done, and then using the required technology to fulfill that construct, that pain point, is a number one job of a product manager. And by the way, I'll recommend a great article. It's by Ben Horowitz. See if you guys can Google up good product managers, bad product managers, either from Anderson Horowitz or from Khosla Ventures, one of the two. Again, I'll repeat that: good product managers face bad product managers. And that'll give you a sense of what this guy authored back in the Netscape days, whatever, 25, I don't know, maybe in the days of the dinosaurs, whatever, right? In our world, the way the speed of the world is moving at. So voice is a great input from, it's another way of interacting with a product or service, just like the click wheel was for the iPad or your fingers are for your smartphones these days. But that is not, it is necessary but not sufficient. So it depends on the use case. It depends on the real need for leveraging voice. If there is a strong use case and a strong backing, don't always look at solving problems ground up from the bottom up. Look at it customer pain point and backwards. Don't look at it, I know this great tech and I will build something great out of it. That's a wrong way of looking at a product problem. You got to look at a customer pain point, work backwards, and obsess with your customers. Do not look at saying I will add voice just for the heck of it, whether there is a need for it or not. If you build the right instrumentation, you'll realize if it is a wrong use case, your customers are probably not even using that voice element. How many of you use voice to actually communicate with each other on WhatsApp? Pop quiz. Give it a thought. That feature exists. You can record your voice and send a message. How many use it? You probably have privacy concerns. You probably have and the reason voice is there is probably because, somebody just cannot type or they find it a pain to type or whatever. I don't know what WhatsApp thought about, but then I don't know. I don't use voice. So I very rarely, very, very rarely. I don't know if some of you should think differently about it. Hope that answers. Maybe we have room for one more question, Ankita.
All right. Let's have one more question. Okay. So here is the last one, wherein Webber is asking, when do you think about diversifying your product offering and how to not lose the key goal of the product?
Good question. Actually, it's a great question. I think his question is an extension to that focus element, right? We have focused enough on a product problem. We've gone really deep. We have solved for all of those use cases around. I get asked this question a lot in the startups and in my past stints that I used to consult, and even in my day-to-day interactions with the companies in the company I work with. So it's about deciding how deep, if you're going deep, how deep do you go? And at what point do you decide, okay, you know what, I've completely exhausted all use cases on this, and then I'm trying to look breadth-wise to enhance the portfolio of offerings? It's a very subjective question. Honestly, you would want to ensure that you have looked at every nuance so that you're positioned for diversifying in a way that also takes XYZ signals into account. Maybe it is about revenues. Maybe if by diversifying you can quadruple your revenues, who knows, double your revenue, I don't know. Maybe you can, whatever, increase your user base 10x if B2C or a B2B player. Great, go for it. But then diversification comes also, remember that there are newer challenges. You probably are battling, diversification around internationalization, diversification around cross-cultural geographies. Which one do you target first? What should you do uniquely? Then your product roadmap has to be able to support all of those use cases, etc. You get the idea, but that's really how I would look at it. Hope this helps, but that's in some sense how I would look at the problem.
Yeah, thanks,
Ankita?
Naveen, for this great answer. And for all the audience whose questions we were not able to, ask Naveen as of now, please connect with him on LinkedIn, and he would be able to probably help you out. And thank you, Naveen, for this great and interactive webinar. I'm sure everyone out here learned something new to be utilized in making valuable products. And also, I would like to tell all of you that NASSCOM has announced the launch of Emerge 50 Awards 2019, providing greater visibility to the dark horses of the future. The winners will be products, startups, and emerging companies that the world watch out for. Last date to submit is 15th July. For more details, please visit homepage of NASSCOM website. Thank you everyone, especially thank you Naveen for this great presentation.
No worries. I really appreciate you inviting me to this webinar. I hope each of my participants has some takeaway. And if there is one thing that I would leave all of you on a parting note, I would say it's like the vision, whatever, 2050. Focus on disruptive innovation to create moving the needle products. Give it a very deep thought in addition to all the other stuff that I said. Hopefully whatever I spoke for the last hour resonated with some pain point you've been experiencing with a product or service in your career, or something you've interacted with in your career, in your personal journey, any of these. And I hope that there should be some valuable takeaways that you could derive. And thank you for your time, for having attended the session. Thank you. And thank you, Ankita, for hosting me. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you, Naveen. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye from my side.
Thank you.